A lot of people, they get into weight training and then they start looking at trying to develop speed, power. They talk about toning, losing fat. They're worried about all these things that aren't relevant to you do weight training. You're either going to make your muscles stronger or not. And that's it. It's either if you're lifting, your muscles are going to get stronger. If you're providing overload, if you stop lifting, your muscles are going to get weaker. And if you just continue to lift weights the same weight, develop a relationship with it, you don't want to move on past 135 on the bench, your muscles are just going to stay the same and then slowly deteriorate. The goal of weight training is to build stronger muscles. That's it. Focus on that. Don't worry about it. All those other things.
We are about to launch.
Truth Not Trends.
What's up, everybody? Truth Not Trends.
Truth Not Trends. Boom, baby. Jesse Schmidt and Liam Bauer in the house.
TNT Strength Studio live. Here we are. We're back. We're unstoppable. We keep on coming back. You can't stop us.
What's going on, people? This is the podcast where we help you maximize your strength as safely and efficiently as possible. My name is Jesse Schmidt. I've been a strength coach for 2,100 days.
2,100 days. My name's Liam Bauer. I have been a strength coach for 35 years this year. 35 years and counting.
Whoa.
Ho!
Hey! Today we're doing an interview with none other than Richard R.J. Hicks.
That's right. Richard.
The 29-year-old Florida phenom.
That's right. RJ is a strength coach, former Division I wrestler out of the Citadel. Now protecting and serving in the Airforce and acting as a strength coach to people who are lucky enough to cross his path. He's been extremely passionate as an athlete and a strength practitioner since the wee ages of 13, 14 years old.
That's right. He's been studying this stuff for a while. He was smart and he started studying Taku's work online at 13 years old. And he's gotten a lot done in his 29 years. He's got a master's degree in exercise science.
That's right. He's got a CSCS.
He's been busy.
He was a mentee of Maximum Bob Whalen out of naturalstrength.com. Bob's another legend in the HIIT community, in the strength training community, and RJ was his Jesse is my mentee and
Padawan.
RJ, there we go. RJ was Maximum Bob's Padawan, if you will.
Do or do not. There is no try.
And still crushing it and hoping to, I think he wants to do coaching full time when he's done with his military service.
But of course, before we get into the interview, we've got to tell you about a couple of our podcast sponsors over here.
That's right.
Don't forget about Low-Cal Foods, Cali.
Feeding your inner athlete.
Feed your inner athlete. Low-Cal Foods, Cali brings you delicious pre-made meals right to your doorstep or right to the TNT doorstep.
That's right. They'll deliver them right here. Walk on in, pick them up while you're here, get an autograph, have a workout, hang out, get some merch. Be a TNT person. Most of these people come and pick up their meals. They don't even stay high. They just walk in the door and grab them and disappear. It's kind of sad. I want them to come and play with us.
So there you go. Get a workout, grab your individually, pop them in the microwave, healthy, quick meals, and be on your delicious way. Make sure when you order from Low-Cal, you use discount code TNT Strength 5 to get 5% off your order.
And after listening to this episode, you are going to be inspired, fired up, and ready to do some incredible strength training on your own. And maybe you don't have a gym. Maybe you're wondering, how can I do these incredible things I've been hearing about? You know what you can do? You can go out and get yourself the Harambe system. The Harambe system is the best band-based strength training system on the planet, made by our friend Khalid Bourbeya in NYC, aka
Boo Robbie.
That's right. Khalid has built this incredible system with a stainless steel bar, a platform made of high molecular weight plastic, this patent-pending sling system that allows you to load these bands and stack them, getting loads all the way up to 1,000 pounds of resistance. You can do any barbell exercise you can imagine using the Harambe system safely and efficiently in the privacy of your own home. It's also portable. You could pack it up take it anywhere you want. It actually has a bag that they make that you can put all the components in. He's recently come out with some brand new custom designed bands. They're, classic bands that you see out there made by other manufacturers are usually 41 inches. He's come up with his own 38-inch design that he feels is even better at stacking that weight. And remember, when you visit the Harambe Systems store, use the code TNT to get 10% off any of the swag they have there available.
People, please enjoy this interview with RJ Hicks
And maximum strength. All right. RJ, welcome to the TNT podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's long overdue.
Oh, I know. Same. It was nice to meet Jesse for the first time.
Nice to meet you too, RJ.
RJ's been listening to a lot of our podcasts.
Well then, that's nice. That's not always a nice compliment to hear.
Yeah, he's a fan. How long have you been reading my stuff?
I think around 2007, 2008 is when I originally really got into reading everything online that I could on weight training, especially when it pertained to athletes. It's been a long journey.
Yeah. That's awesome too. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So that's how you guys first came to know each other, just through, you just found Liam's writing online, or did you guys meet through Bob Whalen, or?
Yeah, kind of it's in a circuitous fashion, I think. I mean, he was probably reading stuff before I knew him at all, like probably on the MMA TV forums or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, and then like a lot of those roundtables and other stuff I was doing a lot of that stuff back then. Plus, I was producing material, so you would find stuff, right? You probably, if you're just searching, you might have found some of the stuff I was writing.
Definitely. Yeah, and then I caught your guys' TNT podcast early on. Maybe, I don't know when you guys came up with it, but I think 2018, I was definitely listening to it.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Right in the beginning.
Yeah, that's awesome. You were like one of our first 15 guys that was listening.
And I was laughing one of the days because I was stationed up in Montana at that time. And you guys, I think, picked a random state. It might have been Montana. You're like, oh, we got one listener in Montana or something. And I was like, oh my gosh.
And that was you?
Can they actually track that? Yeah.
Probably was you.
Wow.
Yeah.
You really were an early adopter. Well, that's awesome.
Faithful. This has been a nice ego boost early in the interview here.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We hear that we're popular in Ghana, but we don't know for sure. I always want to do a shout out to the boys in Ghana, whoever they are. Keep listening.
Tell us a little bit about who you are, RJ. How did you? We know you and Liam came to know each other. We know you've been listening to the TNT podcast for a little while. Who are you as in regard to strength training, and tell us a little bit about your education and your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I originally got into weight training, like most people, freshman in high school is when I really started consistently lifting. I did it to become a better athlete. I saw all the guys that were making the teams, the A teams or the varsity teams, were all big and strong. So figured, if I want to be great, I got to get into weightlifting to help me get the competitive edge. So there's a lot of stuff in high school. Our strength coach was a weight training class we had in school that you could take as an elective. So they did bigger, faster, stronger, that program.
Got it.
Pretty boring, 864, a couple of compound lifts. So doing that 2 to 3 days a week, it alternated. And that was the initial start. And then I got into small group training with other guys that played football and lacrosse. We did that at this guy's basement. He had a whole gym in the basement and backyard. And that was like my first introduction to an actual strength coach and like a hardcore program. We're out there doing, flipping tires, pushing cars in the parking lot, doing front squats in the backyard and cleans. He had like pull down machines, rows, military presses, benching all inside. It was pretty well-rounded program. Not a lot of the stuff I still do or like to do, but it was good. He tracked everything. He pushed us. It was all based off poundage progression. And that really got me into loving weight training and just training in general. And then from there, it skyrocketed. I got introduced into high intensity training while I was a senior in high school. Our wrestling coaches both were high intensity strength training coaches. They took us as a group training into a facility, and they would train us in the off season that way. And it was really cool. And it was eye opening. Now I was using a ton of real high quality machines that I never used before, and they felt great. And it was a lot of fun. And I was always asking questions, why we were doing things. What's the purpose? Why'd you pick this reps? Why'd you pick this sets? I was always interested because I just wanted to learn as much as I could. And that's really when I was online, trying to read everything I could at that time. Wasn't really podcasts around, but articles online, tons of guys out there that were great resources. And then, yeah, just basically sports and lifting weights was my big passion in high school. Went on to college in 2011. I went to the Citadel down in South Carolina, where I continued my athletic career. I wrestled there for 4 years. And again, we had a strength coach for that. So again, now I'm thrown back in. I got a new strength and conditioning coach, new style of training that I was introduced to, which was nice. And same thing, it was regimented all year round, all 4 years, summer programs and everything. And while I was there, I got an intern as a strength coach for the football team to start my own coaching career introduction. While I was doing that, I took exercise science as my major and graduated with that in 2015. So that was my introduction definitely into the strength training world.
What kind of program did they have at the Citadel? Were they HIIT based stuff, or was it more of the other kind of stuff?
No, it was a mix of all the other stuff, which a lot of the programs that they'll take stuff from Olympic lifting and powerlifting. They do the long periodization cycles where they get your maximum lifts for many of the big lifts, and then they try to plan it out for the year on what you're going to lift, so you can try to peak in the cycle. So a lot of it was that. Some of it was the 5-3-1 from Jim Wilder, and a little bit towards the end, they started using some of the West Side methods, the dynamic and max effort and stuff like that.
Yeah, interesting. And, just a quick throwback for people who don't know, BFS, is bigger, faster, stronger, which is a program that's been around since the 70s. I think the guy's out of Utah, right? The guy that created it, the coach, his name is escaping me at the moment, but it's a company and a system that's been around since the 70s. It's very, very specific, as RJ mentioned. Like they basically have 3 workouts a week: strength training, super basic squat, power clean, bench press, box squat, super basic things, some super basic rep range progressions. They do want you to try to beat your records, right, and improve, poundage progression. There are some simple things about the BFS system that I like. What I don't like about it is they tend to overtrain, because they do, not only are they squatting probably 3 times a week, and they're doing those big, powerful movements 3 times a week. They also want people to, on the other 3 days, to do plyometrics and agility and speed work, right? So they're really having guys train like 6 or 7 days a week on that system. If you're following it to the letter, it's a lot. And I think, it's one of those ones where only a few people can tolerate, that much training for the long term. But there's some ideas about it that can be definitely effective. They did have some good ideas. I like a lot of the elements of the BFS. I just think ultimately it's probably just too much volume and stuff for most people in the long run.
Absolutely. And so, and after college, I felt like I had a ton of different experience training. I've done all these different methods. I've had, 5 different strength coaches by this point, and I was confused. I didn't know, what's the best way to train. Right out of college, it was about an 8th month period where I went back to the original gym that I did high intensity training at and became a coach there, just to buy time until I got my orders to go join the Airforce. And so I was just doing one-on-one training with people and training that way. But like I said, I was confused that whole time. What's the best way? What's the right way to train? Because I've seen so many different ways now, and I have information overload.
So what did you do? You like had them do like 3 sets of an exercise, and then do some plyos, and then do a last set failure or something?
Oh no. When I was at the gym, we just did normal high intensity training. So it was a pretty simple layout that we did. It was push, pull, compound leg, and then either an ab or neck movement. And then it was push, pull from a different plane of motion, another leg movement. So if we did, pendulum squats or the MedX Avenger leg press for the first movement, the second movement would be the other one. Or we had a hammer strength deadlift machine that you would do either 2-leg or 1-legged deadlifts on. And that would be just once a week. But it's pretty simple layout.
Single set per exercise?
Yeah, just one set per exercise. Take them as close to failure as you can on the leg movements, and then definitely try to push them to failure on the upper body movements. And then after the second leg movement, you might do wrist roller or something like that. And then you might do a finisher, a sandbag carry or something based off if the person was like young and super motivated. If it was a middle-aged client who's just trying to get in shape, obviously we didn't do those things for them.
Right.
A lot of people like to be breathing hard when they leave the gym.
Yeah, it makes them feel like they have a good workout.
Yeah, so that sounds good though. It sounds like a pretty solid, simple system.
It was, and it was nice because as trainers, we didn't have to the head guy Joe Aben. He didn't just write out the workout and it's like, all right, you guys just monkey see, monkey do, take them through like this exact workout. We got to play within those parameters on what we wanted to do. Whether we want to do overhead press, bench press, the hammer strength dip machine, whatever order we wanted to do it in. There's a lot of flexibility within that template. But for my own training, though, I was confused. So I'm doing that training for everybody, but I'm confused. So I started reaching out. Coach Rob Taylor, I was in the Maryland area at the time, and he's got a nice gym up in Baltimore, and I've seen a lot of his stuff before. So I reached out to him, basically saying, asking probably pretty bad questions at the time, because when you don't know, you don't even know where to start asking. I was like, I'm confused. And one of the things he said to me was, if you really want to be a leader in the field and one of the best strength coaches, try to call somebody every day, get a different strength coach every day, and learn from them. And I was like, okay, nervous to call people, but I wanted to learn this information more than I was nervous to talk to people. So then I did what he said, and I started calling everybody I could. And I started with his podcast. He probably had 40 or 50, and I would just email them and say, hey, can I reach out to you? And just went down the list and just started hitting everybody, talking to anybody I could, whether they were college strength coaches, NFL strength coaches, private sector. And I talked to a ton of great people, learned a ton of information. I still have notes from all these conversations back in 2015. But one of the guys that stuck out the most was, I ended up talking to Bob Whalen, and we connected off of that. He had a prior Airforce career before he became a strength coach. He was in the Maryland, D.C. area at the same time I was. His first mentee was Joe Aben, the guy that ran the Gym Excellence Fitness that I trained at. So I realized hey, I need a mentor if I'm going to get anywhere versus just calling everybody and getting all this random information. So reached out to him, we connected, and then he sent me a bunch of good stuff. We had good talks, and he's like, hey, if you want me to train you, we can set this up, and I can teach you this stuff. I can train you for your own workouts, but then on the side, I can mentor you so that you can become a strength coach. I was game for that. So we got into that, and I started training with him for, I think, 3 years. It was online distance, but, logging all my workouts, he's telling me which ones to do. I know how to do all the exercises, so there wasn't a big worry about having the eyes on for that. But constant communication, phone calls, logging the information on what I did, and just following his programs. And then on the side, him getting me into, hey, I need you to read these books. I need you to listen to these podcasts. Or that was a lot of it, was the reading parts. And then just Q&A all the time. Hey, I have questions on pre-exhaust training or negative training, or, what rep and set schemes are best. And so it's just a lot of force fed of that.
Sounds very similar to Liam's and my, relationship. We, met each other back in 2017, and he kind of, I didn't have the, lifting background that you did, where you were actually training HIIT style, single set to failure, low volume. I only learned that when I met Liam. So before that, I was just messing around. I had read the Schwarzenegger Encyclopedia, so I was messing around with 6 days a week, high volume stuff, and training clients basically in that same way too. Not necessarily 6 days a week, but Liam and I, sparked some conversations around the gym, and it got me got the wheels turning. And I realized, there was a lot of, he had some different ideas that I had heard, doing the last set first, or training to failure, not doing all the additional volume. And he seemed to back it up with some really, not only with research, but then, like you're saying, he introduced me to Brian Johnston's work, J-Reps and Body by Science with Doug McGuff, and a million other books, Heavy Duty, right? Menser, the classic. And and once you sort of see all these different sources that kind of substantiate the high intensity training style, it's really hard to go back. I don't know why you would.
Oh, definitely. And I guess not even just high intensity, but just those similar principles of training they make sense, and they've been proven for so long that they work. Why are you going to try all the fancy new things people are trying to throw out there that don't have a lot of backing or make a lot of sense as you're training?
This is one of those things that I've said, many, many times. It always comes up. My classic thing is, if you sit whoever you think are the top, 50 or 100 strength guys, and they all sat down at a table, they'd have 10 things that they all agreed on 100%, right? And those 10 things are the only things that matter. Like progressive overload, right? Getting all that's training with enough effort, and then everything else is just preference and marketing, right? Like trying to create a niche for yourself, I like kettlebells. You know what I mean? I want to do. I think power cleans, or you know what I mean. That all becomes other stuff. But those core basic 10 things or so are really the only things that you really need to base stuff on.
100%. And that was probably one of the best things I learned from Bob was coming up with a training philosophy, not, just following a program and saying, this is what we do. Like actually having a broad sense of like, these are my principles, and then finding what fits in those principles. Now you got a bunch of tools to use for your clients and can choose the right tool based off of their goal. Where if you're just following, hey, I'm just doing bigger, faster, stronger, you can't, like, what are you going to do for a person that can't squat? Or an older lady that's like goal is not to do power cleans, right? That doesn't match up. It doesn't fit.
Yeah, I've seen trainers tell people that, like, I've seen trainers sort of do themselves a disservice as well as the client. Like somebody sits down in front of them and they're like, oh, you're not going to squat and deadlift and bench. Well, then I can't train you. You know what I mean? like what's wrong with you? Don't you know that's the only way you can get big and strong? Like if you're not willing to deadlift, then just go. I don't want to see you. Get out of my face. If we were doing that, we wouldn't have as many clients. That's for sure. Obviously we know that the tool is not the most important thing, and the exercise itself is not necessarily the most important thing. It's how you apply that stuff to the individual, as you said.
100%. And that's the philosophy, I guess, on training that I've built thanks to Bob is it's got to be hard. It's got to be safe. It's got to be progressive. And then it's got to follow natural training, drug-free training. So there's so many things that can fit in within those 4 categories to train people with. And it keeps it simple. I'm not tied to anything.
Yeah, you may be the number one person that we've interviewed so far whose training philosophy seems to align with ours, because we've interviewed people who do 100% super slow training or basically 100% machine training, but that we've started to sort of describe ourselves as HIIT influenced rather than, high intensity trainers or HIIT trainers, because we don't want to be, totally boxed in to that, whether it's, only training with machines or only ever doing one single set or always training to failure. I know that's blasphemy to not train to failure sometimes, but there might be times when we don't, or not in every single set based on the client we have in front of us or the day for that particular client.
Now how about two things come to mind. Did you get a chance to actually spend time live and in person with Bob, like for any extended period of time? Or was it always a distance relationship?
So I've trained with them in person, but it's not weeks on end. It's just show up, come to visit for 2 or 3 days. We hit a workout. I see him again 8 months later, hit another workout, might be 2 years, hit another workout.
You didn't get a chance to actually like work with him on a day-to-day basis or anything like that?
No, that was just my first, I guess, boss and person in Joe Aben. He trained with him for 2 or 3 years.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny. I mentioned this to you before, and even to him, because I was in the DC area, early in my career. That's where I started my strength training career. And, I heard his name, and, people would say Maximum Bob, but we never, ever met each other. We never crossed paths. We never, until all this time later. And other strength coaches who had met him or worked with him or knew of him would say, hey, have you had a chance, to talk to Bob, work with Bob? And I was like, no, I know who he is. You know what I mean? But it's funny because we were literally right in the same neighborhood, basically. But I never had a chance to actually see his place or experience it, which is unfortunate. And now he's not in that area anymore, right?
No, he's down in the Florida area, and he's mostly retired from training. He does online training with people still, and then he'll write for Hard Gainer 2.0. Still writing, still spreading the word.
Yeah, and you're in Florida now, right?
Yes, temporarily.
Are you close enough to be able to go visit him while you're there? Or
yes, yeah, yep. I see him every couple of weeks. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, there's so many interesting people down in Florida. The coaches, like we always joke about, going down there with a van and just driving all over the state, to see Bob and Jim Bryan, Michael Bradley, Jim Flanagan, the Rock Solid crew. Yeah, all over Gary Bannister was down there. Unfortunately, he passed away not too long ago. There's so many interesting folks just in Florida or in that general area, Even I think Brian's down there too, right? The Vive guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's in Florida, man. What's going on? It's because of Arthur Jones.
Right, where we originally started.
So RJ, you write for naturalstrength.com, and you've written some articles about the undeniable truths of weight training. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because I think we've talked generally about, I know this is one of those things that you've written about, is it's necessary to develop your own philosophy about weight training. But I think it would be valuable for our listeners to, this is Truth Not Trends after all. Like, what are some of those undeniable truths that you like to talk about, and how do they relate to your personal training philosophy?
So those articles I was writing, undeniable truths for weight training, there's 9 of them right now, and it's made for try to help beginners out where to start, and they're broader concepts. Some of the ones I was talking about were training for strength. A lot of people, they get into weight training and then they start looking at trying to develop speed, power. They talk about toning, losing fat. They're worried about all these things that aren't relevant to you do weight training. You're either going to make your muscles stronger or not, and that's it. And it's either, if you're lifting, your muscles are going to get stronger. If you're providing overload, if you stop lifting, your muscles are going to get weaker. And if you just continue to lift weights the same weight, develop a relationship with it, you don't want to move on past 135 on the bench, your muscles are just going to stay the same and then slowly deteriorate. So I try to point out the goal of weight training is to build stronger muscles. That's it. Focus on that. Don't worry about it. All those other things. I talk about balance training. If you're going to train the front side of the body, you have to train the back side of the body. We know a lot of people, they like doing all the bench pressing and curls, and they don't spend the same amount of emphasis on rows and pull downs and chin ups. That's what that article is about, talking about training the upper body the same as you train the lower body. If you got to be able to do squats, deadlifts, leg presses, and then even the smaller exercises are great. Leg extension, leg curl. There's a balance to those exercises. When you're developing your program as a beginner, you don't want to just pick the favorite exercises that you enjoy doing. You want to make sure you're training the same effort and intensity and place the same emphasis on the back of the body as the front, the upper body as the lower body.
You're very fortunate that you had high school strength coaches that were educated. I started lifting weights in high school as a junior. I entered high school weighing about 130 pounds. I was just thick thin, and through weightlifting, by my, a year later, I literally had gained like 50 pounds and my height hadn't changed. I weighed 180 pounds my senior year.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. That was from freshman to senior year. So not exactly, but I started lifting weights my junior year. So most of the results came from that. But I had no idea how to program a workout. So I basically was bench pressing. I was doing push-ups and bench presses and bicep curls, and that was all I knew how to do. And I ended up developing shoulder tendonitis, I think, as a direct result of just an unbalanced training program. So, I mean, those basics that you're mentioning are super important for everybody to keep in mind.
Exactly. And then in progression, people try to overcomplicate that. They want to know what's the best set and rep scheme. All of the progression it's a set goal to let you know when the weight's getting too light for you, and then you need to add weight. So if you say, I want to lift between reps 6 and 10, there's nothing fantastic about 6 and 10 reps. You could do 8 to 10. You could do 10 to 12. You could do 5 to 7. It doesn't matter. But once you're at the top end of the range, that means the weight's too light. And now you can add a little bit of weight, and then you go back to doing it. That's something a lot of people don't understand. They try to overcomplicate that. How many days a week to work out? Perry Rader in the 40s was writing about twice a week training, and people today are still trying to do 5-day, 6-day routines, which is ridiculous. You need to let your body recover, and they don't understand that. They think you gotta go because they think they're building muscle while they're in the gym when it's really taking place outside. The other big tip I put is not following drug training, which a lot of people get confused about online that are new in the sport. They don't understand that most of the champions in bodybuilding, powerlifting, Olympic lifting use some type of performance enhancing drugs to do the feats they do. They're performing at the extreme ranges of their sport. That's what they use to get them above and beyond. It's not necessarily their training that's getting them where they're going. So those split routines that we're seeing most people do in the gyms, that didn't start popping up until the 60s, which at the same time, that's when drugs started to come into the US and get big into the sport of weight training. And then powerlifting developed obviously in the mid to late 50s. So then it was serpentine into there as well. which is tough for a lot of people to, because they can't understand it. I guess they can't separate like this person's on drugs. That's why the program works. It's not because of the program they're doing. So I try to explain to them like, hey, that's why we want to stay away from the split body routines, the super high volume, keeping it basic, couple sets per exercise, 2 to 3 days a week. Follow the history. If you follow the history and you look at everything from, I think the first book in weight training was written in 1879. Well, this guy William Blakey, and if you follow it from there, where he's talking about doing gymnastics and doing simple lifts with whatever objects you have in your home, and he was talking about push-ups, lateral raises, things like that. They started to understand which movements exercise your muscles. And as you progress in history, Alan Calvert with the barbell in 1902. Okay, now we have a tool that we can incrementally add weight to get to the progressive training. So that was a step right. And then they continued into Bob Hoffman took over the Milo company that Alan started, where they're starting to mass produce information. You're training 3 days a week, the whole full body 3 days a week training, the heavy, light, medium, all those things started coming out. We're still getting pretty good information and we're moving forward. And it wasn't until in the 1950s with Helsinki, Dr. Ziegler, finding out about the drugs. I know you talked about that before, Liam, and then coming over back to the US and sharing that with the team, that now the training starts getting kind of funky over here. We start getting into split training, body part training, high volume, and now our progression in history is starting to go backwards. So that whole sweet spot that a lot of beginners start to fall into, because that's what's online a lot of the time, they fall into when they're first starting. That's where they're getting confused. And I try to veer them away from that.
Yeah, it's funny. People, I think, most people have no idea, right, about any of that history. And this was something I know you mentioned was you think that it's important that people do understand the history, right, when they're learning, if they really want to understand, right, history, right, you want to know what you're standing on, the shoulders you're standing on, where's this stuff coming from. And I know that was a big part of Bob's mentorship with you, was making sure that you understood the history of this stuff. And it clearly took, because you clearly have a much better grasp of it than many. But a lot of people have no idea that, it was an American guy, Ziegler, who you mentioned. He's the one that invented steroids, basically. I mean, anabolic steroids, right? Like people were experimenting with testosterone way back, like even in the 30s, right? But it was, the idea of steroids was, how do we take this molecule and tweak it in such a way that we get more of the anabolic effect that we want without the secondary sex characteristics that we don't want. And that's what the first steroid was, which was Dianabol, right? It was the very first one. It was kind of like Pandora's box, right? Like he came back and saw they're playing with testosterone. How can I make this better? He came up with a plan. It worked. And, everybody started taking them. I mean, we had Jim Schmitz on here, the Olympic coach. He jokes about that all the time. He was like, that was just, because it wasn't illegal too. We have to remember that.
Right.
They weren't illegal early on. So it was just became part of what you do. You take your vitamins, you take your Dianabol.
Right.
You go to the gym, like this is just what we do. People have, but the amounts that they were taking compared to now were nothing, right? Like the drugs, not only are there way more drugs, they take a lot more, they manipulate a lot more things. I mean, that's a whole nother topic, right? Which we don't need to go, but it's deep, right? That topic alone is very deep. But yeah, I appreciate the idea of the history and also, yeah, I mean, I know Bob has his his rules or whatever it is, right? Is like the Whelan laws of training, or I don't know what he calls them, right? What is?
Yeah, the commandments.
Yeah, the commandments, and I know that those are some of the training. No drugs, and I know obviously hard work and just the things that you're echoing. And now, is it a big part for you? And it sounds like it is for him, that the training is always total body.
No, it doesn't. No,
you guys do split routines, or did he do split routines at all? Or
yeah, so I've never done the traditional 5 or 6 day split where you're doing body part training, but I have done in college. We definitely did upper lower training 4 days a week. Upper body Monday, lower body Tuesday, off Wednesday, upper body Wednesday, lower body Thursday. I think that's great. You have 3 days off.
Yeah, it still works. It's really whole body twice a week still.
Exactly. It still meets the goal. And then one of the training routines I did with Bob was push day on Monday. So military press, bench press, incline press, squats, leg extension. And then there would have been a couple small tinkering exercises, calf raises, wrist rollers, neck flexion. Really, that just strategically buys you time between exercises so you recover enough to perform well in the next push exercise, because there's not like a pulling push system for that, but it would be a push on Monday. On Tuesday or Wednesday, it would be a pull day. So all the pulling upper body exercises, pulling lower body exercises, hamstring curls, pullovers, whole body push one day, whole body pull, and then the third workout would be total body with equal emphasis. So you're still getting 2 full body workouts in. You're just combining, you're splitting the Monday and Tuesday workout, where now you can get a few more exercises in. And then same with we've done upper, lower, and then full body. That's another 3-day split, right?
That's one I actually like a lot. Like one of the things that we've been doing, like one of our kind of bread and butter things is to alternate like the strength and like some kind of interval training over a 2-week block. I like to train in 2-week blocks, so that basically, if we do strength on Monday, take Tuesday off, we do some kind of interval conditioning Wednesday, Thursday off, strength again on Friday, take the weekend off. The next week you flip flop that. So conditioning Monday, rest, strength on Wednesday, rest. So by the end of that 2-week block, you've had 3 strength and 3 conditioning workouts, always with a day off in between, right? And a lot of times when you do that split, that's one of my favorite, is to do like on the week when you have 2 strength, you might do upper on Monday, lower on Friday. And then on the Wednesday, when you're going to just do strength once that week, do total body, right? So again, you've actually only hit the whole body once each week, right? And I know another thing about Bob's stuff is he says, you could hit the whole body once every 7 to 10 days, right? It could be that infrequent. And I've been writing and talking about for years is like, if you're not going to a personal training studio or what, right? You don't have to be in the Gregorian calendar, right? You find the pattern that works for you. You could train once every 5th day, once every 10th day, right? Whatever works. And you need to experiment, right? Like I've had some of my best results when I train like basically about once every 4 or 5 days back in the day. And when you're trying to have a business, right, we can't, it's harder, right? If we have clients that are on all these rotating schedules where they're just sort of fitting it in once every 7 days or 10 days, you could do it, but it's not as user-friendly.
Harder to automate.
Yeah, harder to automate, exactly. So, the business model lends you to find that place. How often can we get them in here and still make sure they're recovered, right?
As you were talking, RJ, about, the kind of the history of weight training and when the drugs got involved, I found myself thinking, wouldn't it have been nice if these bodybuilders came up with like the on the juice program and the off the juice program, so that you know which one to do, like higher volume if you're on the juice or whatever. And then I realized that, while Schwarzenegger was doing, the 6-day-a-week Schwarzenegger program, Menser and Yates, they were already over there training, much lower volume. I think Menser often did 3 days a week and Dorian Yates did 4 days a week.
Yeah, I mean, but they're each one is like Schwarzenegger's like the 70s, Menser's more like the 80s, and
right.
Yates is like the 90s.
Yeah,
different decades, but definitely, interesting interpretations. It was ironic. One of the ironies of the HIIT training is a lot of times the naysayers would be like, "Oh, that only works if you're on drugs, right? Like the HIIT only works with you, right?" And if you're not on drugs, you got to do all this high volume stuff. It's like they have it completely flip flopped, right? The reality is HIIT works for everybody, and it would work better if you're on drugs,
right?
Right. And because you'll still have recovery, you're going to work hard, you're going to be totally recovered, you can crush it again. You'd have all the same advantages that you have from taking the drugs, if you want to call them advantages, and you'd have more rest, which is what Menser was doing.
If you look at the routines that a lot of high intensity practitioners use, they mirror what Bob Hoffman was writing about in Strength and Health in the 30s. He was doing full body routines. A lot of the pamphlets that they didn't sell like workout programs, but they would write programs, and they would be full body. They'd be like, hey, you're gonna do military press, curls, upright row, bench press. Well, they didn't do bench presses until they had the bench in like the 50s, but they would do, squat, deadlift, and then maybe an abdominal movement. And it's like, well, that's pretty similar to push and pulling and legs that a lot of high intensity gyms are doing. They say do 1 set, and if you wanted to, build up to 3 total rounds.
Right. Even Tommy Kono, right, the Olympic weightlifter, Tommy Kono had, a recommended routine that he would have his lifters do before they actually started the Olympic stuff. And it really was kind of like that, like the classic Hoffman. It always started with 1 set. And it was like, bench, it was push pull, right? Shoulder press, upright row, bench press row, squat, deadlift, same thing like you just described. And he would start having them do 1 set of 8 to 12. And, maybe over months, it would build up to 2 or 3 total sets. That was like his base program before you ever started to learn how to power clean and snatch and all that other stuff, right? It was like, here's just a strength plan, right? And they called it like the Kono course. It's still, you can still find it. You can probably Google it and it would come up. But, he was an incredible athlete, as in the Olympic weightlifting world. And I mean, he also, was one of those guys with not just super talented in Olympic lifting, but he had an amazing physique. I mean, he could like walk on the stage and win a bodybuilding contest in his day.
Yes, he was amazing.
Yeah, incredible. And he actually, when it comes to Olympic weightlifting, he wrote a book, which is probably my favorite book on Olympic weightlifting, because I appreciate Olympic weightlifting as a sport. It's a sport that takes a lot of skill and technique to master. As we know, it's not the safest choice for as a strength training modality, but as a sport, it's incredible.
It is, and I'm the last person that can say it's not you shouldn't do it because it's not safe. But I wrestle. That's terrible for your body and extremely hard on it. So I understand that Olympic lifting and all those lifts that are involved in it, they're not dangerous if that's your sport of choice. But just for me, if I'm training with athletes, I don't want them to put all that extra stress on their tendons, their ligaments, muscle tears that they could get from doing those lifts. I don't want to add that to what they're already getting on the football field, on the lacrosse field, on the wrestling mat. I don't want to duplicate their efforts. So I think it's great if you want to participate in Olympic lifting. You probably have less injuries, maybe less injuries than somebody that's going to compete in wrestling, but just don't add the two together.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, you're definitely asking for trouble, and it's unnecessary.
Hey, what are those guys doing here? Whenever I feel like I'm stalling out on my bench press, I know I need a new strength curve. Whether you're stalling out on the road or stalling out in the gym, you need something with great engineering. That's right. And so look for the pendulum. Pendulum. Not just your average strength machines. No, they have smooth strength curves, amazing rigidity. And did we mention the engineering's fantastic? That's right. Not to mention, they come in cool colors. Like red and silver. Well, that was kind of weird. What was that all about? Back to the interview.
Random question. What is the worst injury that you ever dealt with in wrestling, RJ?
So for me, back spasms. And we're talking not for like a day, just like weeks. My back locked up. And I remember when I was in college, I could hardly get out of the bed. We lived in bunk beds and I was on the top bunk. So I'd have to like lumber out of that. And then just going to class all day. I can't get up out of the chair. I can't like sit down in the chair. And then just walking around like that, you're completely no strength if your lower back's gone.
It's incredibly incapacitating. People have no idea until they experience it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I felt a lot of pressure to continue to wrestle through that. So I would still go to practice. I would still do our time runs.
Oh my God.
I'd go do the weightlifting stuff. I would have to modify. I couldn't do any of the lower body lifts that everybody else was doing. I'd have to do single leg stuff because my lower back. And then I'd go out there and wrestle and people pouring on my head again more, which is going to my lower back. So a lot of lower backs. But wrestling, seeing a lot of teammates and other opponents that we've wrestled against, always shoulders and knees torn, ACLs, meniscus tears, shoulder tears, real easy because people, you grab a hold of them and then they just want to do a 360 to get out of it while you're holding their arm or their knee, and your body doesn't work that way and immediately tear.
Were you doing Greco-Roman or were you doing like freestyle stuff?
So we did for college, they call it folk style, which is really close to freestyle.
Yeah, folk style, sure.
Yeah, so we did that in high school and college, and then afterwards, I competed in a couple Greco tournaments, and then got to wrestle for the Airforce team for a little bit, and did freestyle and some Greco.
Nice.
And so I got both parties. I like the Greco a lot. Feel a little safer doing that too. I'm not getting into weird compromise positions.
Yeah, Greco-Roman wrestling. So tell people the difference so they understand what the difference between the two is.
So to keep it simple, Greco is all upper body attacks and throws. You're not allowed to tackle below the waist to take people down. Where freestyle or folk style, you're allowed the whole body. You're able to attack to try to manipulate your opponent to get them down to the mat for a takedown. So that's the biggest difference.
I think Greco translates well to the MMA stuff too. That stand-up grappling. So many components that get used. You see, like people like Dan Henderson, right, who transmitted that successfully. It seems like it's a pretty good marriage. That ability to be able to manipulate people, get a hold of them, know what to do, how to respond, how your body feels when people are pushing or pulling on it, right? Gives you good spatial awareness and kinesthetic sense and all that.
I know you've written also, RJ, about, sort of the nuances and differences between strength training and training for your sport, which is something that we talk about often. And I think needs to be talked about often because there are so many misconceptions. Basically, nobody understands motor transfer, what that is, that, you can actually do stuff that can have a negative effect on your, training for your sport. And just as you're talking about, how basically, wrestling, beat up your body, I think a lot of people would have the reaction of, oh, I know this wrestler, he's so strong, and make the connection from A to B that wrestling makes you strong, right? Which it might, just like Olympic lifting might make you stronger, right? But there are two sort of omissions there, which is that number one, the sport can make you stronger sometimes. I do, like obstacle course training, rock climbing, and those things can definitely make your upper body stronger, but you can definitely also hurt yourself. So there's the risk of injury. And then the other omission is that if you are, like you were talking about earlier, training, lifting weights to train for strength, you basically should never get hurt, And so the when you really weigh them honestly, the risk of injury and the benefits of the sport against, the strength training, you find that there are two very different things. And most people conflate those things all the time.
They do. And a lot of athletes have the wrong mentality when it comes to getting better at their sport. And I did the same thing when I was in high school and college. I thought I need to train harder on our runs and our lifting, and this is gonna get me to the next level where you're right, it's 100% motor learning. And that was nice because I went and got my master's in exercise science later. I had a few years between that and my bachelor's, so I had more time to think about it. And we took motor learning, and they're talking about transfer of skills and saying that it's got to be exact for one movement to transfer to another. And that just helped me as an athlete as I continue to go to wrestling practice afterwards, because now I knew if I'm going to work on this takedown, I can't do it 50%. And my partner can't just be standing there like a dummy. Like, that is literally wasting time. I have to go full speed when I do the takedown, and he's got to give me a real look if I want this to transfer on the mat. Which, if you do that for whether you're playing basketball, lacrosse, wrestling, football, running routes, and coming off the line, if you're blocking, you get so much better at your sport quicker. And you'll notice practice is so much harder. One of the good wrestling coaches I have here, is it deep practice, where you're completely focused on the movement you're doing it to the best of your ability, and everything else is shut out. That's what's missing with a lot of athletes, because we get distracted. We get distracted with plyometrics is a big thing. Everyone, I want to be faster, blah, blah, blah. When you're doing your sport, that is the plyometric. When you're sprinting on the football field, that is a plyometric. If you're jumping for a pass, that's you don't need to do it. Volleyball, I remember I watched the volleyball girls team train in college sometimes, and they're doing all these plyometrics. I'm sitting here thinking in my head, aren't they at practice only doing jumping? Like, why are you just duplicating the effort?
People do not understand. Yeah, that sprinting, like you said, it's got its own stress shortening cycle, right? If you're trying to sprint as fast as possible, it's exactly what you're trying to do.
I'm not denying that plyometrics don't work, but I know if you want the skill to transfer, it's got to be the exact thing. So me taking a shot in wrestling as hard as I can is the plyometric. Me doing death jumps is not going to transfer over to me getting a better takedown.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. That's the classic thing. You see these guys, doing the giant box jumps all the time, right? And number one, people don't understand that just because you can jump on a 50-inch box, you don't have a 50-inch vertical. Like, those guys are not jumping with their legs directly straight under them.
No.
Pulling their legs up to their ears, you know what I mean? Their vertical is not that high. They just have a combination of timing, flexibility, execution on a skill that's basically irrelevant, right?
Yes.
Box jumps are not important for anything. The thing because I was a soccer player, the thing I always tell these coaches, you see them, like you were saying, people are doing plyos for volleyball. It makes no sense. I see soccer players with those little agility ladders, right? And they got the kids running through the agility ladders. And I'm like, what do you think is going to do better? More time with the ball on their feet? You know what I mean? Or half an hour of agility ladder. Like, that is not making any difference to their ability to control the ball, which is literally the core of soccer, right?
So just if you're listening to this, like what Liam's talking about is like picture like the soccer player running down the field, right? Like, if there was a direct skill transfer of doing that agility ladder to doing that in the game, they would be dribbling the ball downfield, and all of a sudden they would just like break out in this like agility ladder, shuffle, right? Like imagine if a soccer player did that. Like they've got the ball and all of a sudden they're trying to shake a defender or something and they just break down like agility ladder and they're doing this like karaoke step or whatever.
Shuffle, yeah.
Like you just literally never see that in the actual sport, which means that at best there's probably a neutral skill transfer when you're doing that exercise.
That I always love about transfer, which people don't understand, is if transfer is real, right, it has to go both ways. This is the one that nobody understands, right? The light bulb moment. Like people will go, if I'm a BMX rider, right, and I'm going to practice kneeling on a stability ball to be better at BMX, right, or whatever. And obviously, if this was true, that would mean if I was already great at the stability ball, then I should automatically be great at the BMX bike, right? Like I'm already good at it because there's a direct transfer, right? So if I'm good at one, I'm good at the other. If that's not true, then the transfer doesn't exist. You know what I'm saying?
So what's an example of a transfer that does go in both directions?
It would have to be that exact thing, right? You'd have to do the skill that you need. Yeah. So whatever that skill is, you'd have to, the only way to do it is to do the thing. Like if you want to get good at your BMX bike, you got to ride your bike and you got to learn to maneuver it, manipulate it, right? Like these guys, when you don't see those guys now, like training for the X Games and stuff, it's all on the bike. They create like giant foam pits, right? And stuff so they can do those crazy flips and land safely. They're not doing something else separate and then trying to figure out how to get it back onto the bike. They have to do the specific skills. So it doesn't work. Standing on a stability ball doesn't make you better at anything except for standing on a stability ball.
No, and then you get into cleans. A lot of teams do cleans, power cleans, whatever, however they want to word it. Whether they start from the knee or from the ground. A clean is good exercise. Okay, you're gonna train your hips, your shoulders, your upper back a little bit during the pull. To me, it's not a great exercise. The initial pull off the ground is not going to outdo a deadlift or a well manufactured leg press. That second pull that you do to get the bar moving from your thighs up isn't going to outdo a shrug, a row. It's not going to work more muscle than any of those movements. And then honestly, it just free falls from there. And then you might do, if you catch it low with good skill, you're going to do the concentric part of a front squat. Well, that's not going to outdo you just doing a set of squats. So I don't think for athletes, that's necessarily an exercise. It's a good idea because of the high risk it's involved. I think it's got 32 coaching points to do a power clean last updated. And it's a dynamic movement. It definitely, a lot of people are like, yeah, it's a lot of force that comes out of it, of course, but that force has to go through your body. And that goes back to what I was saying, where the athletes don't need more force going through their body because the sport they're playing already develops all that forces.
For sure.
Yeah, especially any kind of combat athlete. Yeah, like like you say, wrestling, football, lacrosse, anything where people are bodies are banging into other bodies.
It's funny, as you're talking about it, like you bring up, there's 32 coaching points, to do a power clean or whatever, any Olympic lift. It makes me think that like the best justification for why, like a professional or like college or high school or whatever level strength coach would have their players do that lift is to make their own job important, right? Because like if you have your players doing this very technical lift, it's going to require a lot of coaching, right? And if they don't have that coaching, they might not be doing it right. They might hurt themselves more, right? So, we should be
job security.
Yeah, exactly. Right, we should be doing power cleans because you have to do them for your sport, and you have to keep me here because I know how to do the power cleans well. And I don't think it's that people like disagree that Olympic lifting is dangerous. I think it's
people disagree, but
yeah, but they definitely think that it's necessary to have in the program.
Yeah, the big thing is triple extension, right? You always hear that one. Like, it trains triple extension. Well, I don't know if you saw my article not long ago on the blog about if I had to pick just one. It was like an article I put up recently. But it's it was about doing the clean deadlift and shrug. It's basically like a slow motion deadlift. Then you shrug and you go up on your calf raise right at the top, but you do it in slow motion, right? To me, I tell every coach that thinks you should do power cleans, I go, just replace your power cleans with this exercise, right? It's totally safe. It hits all the exact same muscles. You do it slowly.
Maybe more.
Yeah. It's like the safest version of that movement. And, they'll go, but it's not explosive, right? like it's missing that. Like I go, no, because like you said, the bar is just floating in the middle, and the person is moving quickly under the bar. But you know what I mean? That part is really the least important part, unless you're trying to be a good Olympic lifter. So that's, I try to replace that for everyone. Get them super good at a clean deadlift and shrug, which I learned from Jim Schmitz, who was an Olympic lifting coach. He makes all of his athletes get super good at that movement, and he always recommends that they do it super slow. He calls it slow mo. And it's a great movement, and it has everything. It hits everything from your neck down, and it's safe, efficient. You get balance because you get up, you have to go slow and get it way up on those tiptoes. There's a balance stuff going on, right? It takes practice, it takes skill, but it's way safer.
Yes. And that's the thing. I think that's great. I'm going to write that down and use that in the future. But back to the clean, if you add weight to the bar when you can do the amount of reps you need to do, you can get stronger with it, just like any other exercise. If I had a client that wasn't an athlete and really wanted to do power cleans or hang cleans, I'd substitute it maybe for a vertical pull movement for one of the days of the week. Like, all right, you can do it, but just understand the risks that you by like performing this exercise. But if you feel like you need to have it, like you can do it, you get strong, just know that you can get hurt from it. I think a lot of coaches use that too, because one of the limitations with a barbell is the amount of pulling exercises you can do. And there's a lot of coaches for athletes that you got to use free weights only. Like, can't use machines. Machines are bad.
Right.
It was funny because I got the background history. Mark Hasanovich was the first strength coach at the Citadel.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Far before when I was there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I guess we had machines in the weight room, which now it's just all platforms. But I guess they wanted him to do Olympic lifting for the athletes, and he wanted to do it. So he decided to move on to a different team, which is, a loss for us. But a lot of people like the free weights, and they think that's only for athletes. Pulling exercises, bent over barbell rows, a lot of risk with that. And coaches know that. That's why most of them don't put them in their program. You can't really do a vertical pull. You're going to have people do chin-ups. Well, if you have offensive linemen, they can't do chin-ups. If you have new beginners that aren't strong, you can't do chin-ups. But they don't have any pull-down machines. They don't have any hammer strength row machines, which is a huge limit. And it's like, those are good exercises. You got to have the athletes do those. A leg press. I like squatting. If someone can do squats safely and correctly, sure, use a squat. I also like the pendulum squat machine. I love using that. I think that's a great movement. So use those. But they don't want people to use a leg press. Well, what do you do if an athlete's got a back injury or doesn't want to load their spine heavy because they get injury? Well-developed leg presses, hammer strength makes a lot of good ones, especially the older versions. Pendulum, Nautilus, Med-X, all good leg presses that athletes can use, and they're just going to develop the same muscles as long as you're training progressively. And then you're going to go take those muscles that are stronger and then apply it to their sports practice later that week. That's what I think a lot of people are missing. They think those exercises, using those free weights, the ground-based training, the dynamic movements in the gym are going to transfer over to the sport, when really all you're going to do is make your muscles stronger. So now your muscles are stronger, you can move more efficiently because it takes you less effort to get into positions to bend your knees, to lower your hips, to explode from your hips. It's all less effort. Now you can apply it to that skill more forcefully.
That's another thing that I always tell people is like, because the skill is still the most important thing for every athlete, right? You have to master the skills of your sport, and it is the foundation, right? Like, yes, being stronger is better, right? That classic adage, like, all things being equal, stronger athlete's a better athlete, right?
Yes.
If you and me have the exact same skill and I'm stronger, I might have an advantage, right? But I always tell people, we use the car analogies a lot around here. So I say, what if you had a car with like a 4-cylinder engine, right? And I like put an 8-cylinder engine in there and you didn't know it, right? And you get out there and you step on the gas. Your car can go a lot faster, but it doesn't mean you're a better driver.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, if you haven't practiced driving, now you got a big fast engine, you're just going to go wrap it around a tree. You know what I mean? You have to practice the skill of driving, or else because a guy who's a good driver will beat the guy with a bigger engine, even in a smaller car, right? Because he has the skills of the driving. That's true on everything. Skill is the foundation of that stuff. So now you combine those two things. That's where that little extra comes from. Now we've got a bigger engine and the high skill.
Yeah, the dominant driver.
Yeah, it makes me think that maybe one of the reasons that people sort of avoid that like realization is because practicing, like anybody who's been an athlete, like at a high level, you realize that like the practice is day in and day out, right? You grind, you practice when you're bored, sometimes you're tired, sometimes, sometimes you hate the sport you normally love, right? And it can be frustrating, there's like a delayed gratification effect. Whereas like when you lift weights, you can just chase the pump, and you can feel good in the moment, right? You get that nice dopamine hit. You don't have to wait for the next game to roll around to get the right pitch to hit or the right pass thrown to you or whatever it is.
That's why I think that might be the reason why a lot of guys, are like kind of on the fence with their sport. They kind of go, "Oh, I got into weightlifting instead."
Right.
Yeah. Because it's a lot of work, especially to crack those upper echelons, as you know. With every time you step, and I'm sure you experienced it because I certainly did. You go up. When I was in local teams that were good, and then you make it to the all-star team. And then I go to the college, and now everybody's been recruited, and there's all Americans, right? And every time you keep going, holy crap, there's a whole nother floor I didn't know about. And then you climb up to that floor. And, when I graduated college, I went and tried to play pro, so now I thought I came out of college feeling pretty good about myself. And I was back with those floors over my head again. And then I was like, shit, I got to climb. There's like 3 more floors. And those floors look like they're really far away, and you got the guys downstairs are looking at you going, wow, you're great. And I'm like, there's 3 floors over my head. So yeah, it's hard, man. People don't realize, we were listening to this interview with Chris Bumstead, who's the natural, he's the classic physique Mr. Olympia for the last few years. He made that comment, in passing, like only one Mr. Olympia wins a year. You know what I mean? Like that may be why you're training, but it's probably not going to happen. You're just like that, right? Like, keep doing what you're doing, be passionate, work hard, right? But, there's literally one a year, right? How many gold medal guys are there, right? You gotta be there because you want to be there and do your best, right? But, there's only a few breaking world records or being the top of the pile. It's just incredibly difficult.
It is. And then the most important part with that athlete is that they're not hurt. They have to be able to last the whole season. It doesn't do them any good if they're the star and then ACL tear in the beginning of the season or lower back injury and they're out for 6 to 8 weeks.
Especially at those high levels, right? I always try to get people to understand, like if I'm a professional strength coach, if I'm working with $1 million guys, like the last thing I want to do is hurt those guys in the gym, you know what I mean? With some stupid stuff. Like my goal is for their career longevity, for safety, for injury prevention, right? If you're hurting people, you're not going to last too long,
Because the goal is getting them to their next contract.
Yeah.
It's not to enter a powerlifting competition or an Olympic lifting competition. And that's everyone. A lot of people jump on that and they're like, oh, well, that just means you're training like a sissy. No, they're training hard. We're just doing smarter exercises. They're still training progressively. They're training hard and they're training year round. They're training their full body. We're not dumbing down the training. We're not having them do body weight and band only exercises that just give them a little pump and make them feel good. They're still training hard. It's just better selection on the exercises and maybe the form they're using is tightened up.
I like that series of articles. It sounded like everybody should go out and track them down and read them. But I like the idea. It sounds like such an oversimplification of just train for strength.
Yes.
like because I've always said that for years, right? Like if you do that, everything else comes along for the ride, right? If you train hard as you can and you rest and recover right, you usually get everything else that you think you want. You get pumped or toned or, your clothes fit better. All those things happen when you train for strength and you make that your number one goal. The rest of it kind of comes along for the ride.
It does. And that was one of my favorite things Bob always used to tell me is strength is an enabler. It allows you to go do your cardio, allows you to go play your sport better. It allows you to walk up the stairs better. It allows you to have a higher quality of life. Getting those muscles bigger and stronger is the main thing. That is what weight training is for. It goes back to progressive resistance training and everything that every strongman, Bob Hoffman, Alan Calvert, John Grimmick, any of those guys, all they talked about was you have to use a tool that allows you to use progressive resistance exercise. That's the main thing. That's why we're doing this. It's none of those other reasons that you mentioned. And people lose focus of that.
Yes. I just want my glutes to look good.
The focus makes a big difference. Like that example of the volleyball team you were mentioning, like they're jumping and hitting balls and then they go over to the side here and now they're jumping off a box. And I think there are 2 different things happening when in reality, you're hitting a ball. So there's a different sports skill involved there. But from a plyometric standpoint, it's both jumping. It's just that while you're thinking about hitting the ball, you're practicing your sport. You're just not thinking about hitting the ball when you're jumping off the box. If you're focusing on getting toned, right? You're still getting strong, even if you're not focusing on that. You're focusing on getting toned, or it could be the other way around too. It's all in the perception.
One of the other guys I was lucky to talk to a couple times, Dick Connor. He's an older guy, rode in Hard Gainer and had a gym out in Indiana called The Pit. He said, you lift weights to see what happens to your body. They'll develop how they're supposed to develop. You don't do a certain program to look like a specific way. You just got to lift weights and then see what happens.
That's another thing that we talk about a lot, right? You put 100 people on the same workout, you get 100 different bodies.
Yeah, there's nothing. They're all doing the same things. Their bodies just going to respond differently. It's genetics.
Some of them, their glutes are going to be bigger and rounder, and some of them aren't. Some of their calves are going to be bigger, and some of them aren't. All those things are going to happen. And like you said, their body's going to go where it goes based on the factory, based on how it came out of the factory.
That's right. Cards they were dealt.
Yep, genetics is the king. That's awesome, man. That's great stuff. So now, what are you doing with your coaching now?
So right now, I'm volunteering out at one of the guys friends with Thomas Knapp. He's got an awesome gym, Myoblast, down in the St. Pete area. Just helping out there. It's good for me because just getting into the habit of training more clients, just doing one-on-one. Probably do like 14 a week after work, which is nice. Gets me extra practice working because a lot of coaching is psychology, understanding the individual, trying to motivate them, see how they tick. And then when I'm back home where I'm normally stationed, usually I volunteer with high schools. So I'm usually a volunteer coach for the wrestling team, and then I'll run their weight training for them. One of the schools in Montana, I was doing their off-season strength and conditioning for all their athletes. And then outside of that, some military guys I'll train, and I'll train just some one or twosies people and do it either in a commercial gym or in my garage gym, stuff like that, where it's still part-time.
Tell us a little bit more about Thomas's stuff. Like, what is it that you like about it, or what is it about his approach that's you find interesting?
So I like his. So he's a high intensity guy, but I like that he combines free weights and machines. He's got all Nautilus first and second generation, the MedX machines that you could think of, but he'll still have people do trap bar deadlifts. He'll have them do walking lunges. He'll have them do dumbbell military presses standing, which I think is great. He doesn't restrict himself to, we can only use the machines. Whenever I travel, I always try to find if there's a high intensity gym around, and I'll jump in, get a workout with them, because I'm trying to always learn from people. And a lot of the gyms I go to, they got medics. It's always super slow, so I can only push it at 10 seconds down and 10 seconds up. And I feel like I never get to actually experience the exercise or the machine because I'm so forced into doing it just one specific way. And there's no, obviously you're controlling the weight up and down, but there's no necessarily rep speed every time. Sometimes someone might say, hey, do 5 up, 5 down, but he doesn't handcuff himself when he's training his clients. We do usually more exercises. It's like 12 exercises a workout, which is nice. A bunch of gyms I've been to, you do 5, the big 5 they'll do, and that's it, or they might do 7. So it feels better, definitely, to me doing 12 exercises jammed into that 30 minutes, which is pretty good. Those are some of the good things I like.
Good stuff, man.
Doing the Lord's work over there in Florida.
Yeah, I love this stuff.
Well, RJ, it's been really great talking with you today. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
I know you write these undeniable truths of weight training for beginners. If there was one key takeaway for beginners to take away from your philosophy of training, what would you say that is in 3 words or less?
Progressive training.
There you go.
Yeah, got to be progressive with your training.
Train for strength, right? There's your 3 words right there.
Train for strength. I like that.
Super awesome to have you on today. Thanks for sharing. It was very. We've been talking a lot about wanting to get back more into the roots of just the good old hard training. So this was a great one for our catalog today. Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you guys.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Really nice to meet you, RJ.
Yeah, really nice to meet you too.
Take care.
Take care, guys.
Boom, baby!
What's up, people? Thank you so much for listening to this episode of
Truth, Not Trends.
That's right here at TNT Strength Headquarters, Truth Not Trends.
Please, if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, rate, and review us on whatever platform you're listening to us on. And don't forget to share with a friend.
You can find us on the web at tntstrength.com.
That's right, TNT Strength now coming to you in person at 5255 College Avenue in Oakland, California. You can call the studio 510-768-5421. You can also text us at 855-796-9905.
Or shoot us an email at contact@tntstrength.com. And whatever you do, Stay off of that stupid blue bubbly bosun. I got my stink face on.
Mixed and edited by Desmond McNeese for We Mixed It, LLC. Go to whatsoundsawesome.com.
I forgot to hit record on the video. Fuck me.